Tonight on This Week in Politics.
Do you ever get used to the criticism?
No.
For things that you say?
I don't, and I hope I never do. I hope that I always feel it, because I think if there's a point where it doesn't bother you anymore, then you've become probably cynical and have lost touch with people.
An expanded edition of This Week in Politics featuring our sit-down interview with Governor Kristi Noem. We talked about the state's response to COVID-19, her efforts to overturn voter-approved recreational marijuana in the state, her time on the campaign trail with and for former President Trump, and what her political future may look like. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Allen. Thank you for being with us this evening. This interview happened at the governor's residence this past Tuesday. It was a dual interview, myself and my colleague, Jack Cottle from KOTA Television in Rapid City, and no question was off limits. Governor Noem, thank you for making time for us. As always, we do appreciate it. I'd like to lead off here with a question about COVID-19. For months now, you have been appearing in a commercial that has urged people during this pandemic to wash their hands, to social distance, and to stay at home if they feel at all sick. What has not been in those commercials is you saying wear a mask. Irregardless of your feelings about a mask mandate, we have had people call into the station saying, why isn't she telling people to wear a mask as part of that? What would you say to that?
Well, what you're referencing is a public service announcement that we've had on air, reminding people of CDC guidance. And throughout the last many months, CDC guidance has consistently changed. My position on masks has been that people should wear one if they want to. I'm not going to mandate them statewide. I certainly don't want people to be shamed if they choose not to. But particular masks do work in certain situations. We do know that N95 masks worn and changed at the right appropriate time and not being touched can work in certain situations where people can't socially distance. But there's so many qualifiers on what the science has shown us about the virus and how masks impact the spread, that is why whenever we do talk about masking, it includes all of those details that I just mentioned.
Governor, voters passed a pair of marijuana measures in the last election, legalizing both medical and recreational marijuana. On other issues, you have talked about letting the voters and letting the people make their own decisions. Why the difference on this one? And is the driving force behind the legal challenge for Constitutional Amendment A, is that more the opposition to marijuana, or is that more the idea that that may not be constitutional itself, the measure?
Well, before the election happened and before these ballot measures were even voted on, I made pretty clear what my position was to South Dakota voters, that I was not in favor of legalizing marijuana, that I didn't believe anybody got smarter from smoking pot, and that I participated in some campaign commercials telling people how I felt about it, and was pretty bold in saying that I felt this legislation was flawed. Now that it's passed and looking through it and implementing it as governor, which is what we're doing today, our Department of Health, our Department of Public Safety, Department of Revenue are all standing up operations to implement these ballot measures. There were flaws in the legislation, and I had a couple of law enforcement officers bring these to my attention, as well as several other folks. And they are moving forward with litigation and with my support. So we'll see what that happens with that litigation. If it is successful and that recreational marijuana measure is taken out of our state constitution, that's a different situation than what we have today. But right now, I'm moving forward to implement both measures because that's what the voters said to do.
Now, supporters of Amendment A look at that as overturning the will of the voters. Do you see it that way?
I don't. I see that changing our state constitution is a big deal. We have to do it appropriately. The way this was written is inaccurate for how those are to go forward by covering two different topics, putting in a whole new amendment and a whole new article into the Constitution. We need to make sure that this was done legally before we can implement, and that's what this litigation is all about.
I'm curious in getting your thoughts on this. I've wanted to ask you this question for a while, and I now have the opportunity.
Yeah.
In the weeks following the November presidential election, former President Trump was very outspoken in his criticism towards Governor Kemp of Georgia, a Republican, and Governor Ducey of Arizona, also a Republican, saying that they weren't doing enough to further the process, to figure out if there was election fraud. They weren't doing enough, in his estimation, to make sure that the will of the people had been done. He thought there was a problem there. I'm interested in your thought on this from this viewpoint. You're a supporter of the former president, but these are also two Republican governors, leaders of your same party. When you saw that unfolding, what did you make of it, if anything?
You know, every governor has a different situation, and I didn't like a lot of the comments that President Trump was making. I always supported the policies that he pursued while he was president because they were good for South Dakota. But many times his language has been very difficult for a lot of us to take. After the election, there was discrepancies in different states with how the election unfolded, and I was pretty clear that I believed President Trump deserved his day in court. He got that. He lost all of his legal challenges, and therefore we saw a peaceful transition of power to President Biden, and that is what makes America special.
And I've got a quick follow-up
Sure.
for you, if I can. Do you believe Joe Biden was duly and properly elected? As we sit here with you right now, do you have any doubts or concerns?
I don't. I do think that there was discrepancies in some states, and we'll just have to go through. Those states have the ability to go back and evaluate how their election proceeded. But he was elected, and we had the transition. He was sworn in. I attended his inauguration, and I look forward to working with him on policies that will actually be good for South Dakota.
You've been getting a lot of national attention lately. You made that decision. You put yourself out there on the national stage. You're speaking at CPAC later on this month. Now, you've said you want to remain as governor here in South Dakota. Why then so much energy put into those national issues?
Well, Jack, I think if we're honest, we would say the only reason people really found out who I was over the last year was because a lot of people attacked me for the decisions that I was making here in South Dakota as governor. When a lot of the national media started saying I was wrong and I was reckless and I was endangering the people's health here in our state, is really when people started to find out who I was. What I did is continue to focus on making the best decisions for the families that are here in our state, and then going forward, do what I could do to support other candidates that really were supporting policies that were good for our way of life. That's why I went out and supported the president, President Trump, when he was running for election, is because a lot of what he pursued when he was president was good for our state. He put more money in people's pockets, created more jobs, got us more trade agreements for our farmers, really pursued national security issues. Those were all incredibly important to the people of South Dakota. Since then, I recognize that people now know who I am and I'm getting a lot more attention, but I'm still very, very focused every day of taking care of the people in this state and doing the job they elected me to do.
Is another term as governor here still your number one plan?
It is. Yeah, I hope they'll give me the honor of working for them another 4 years. I plan to run for re-election, and we'll continue to go out and talk to folks and see if they'll support me in that.
What was your reaction when the former president tweeted out that you should primary John Thune in 2022?
Yeah, that was shocking to me, and I immediately responded with a tweet of my own that I had no plans to do that and that I intend to run for re-election. Very happy being here in South Dakota. And I think the people who know me best know that this is where my heart is. I'm a farmer and a rancher, love my family, and that this is a much better way of life here full time than going to DC again.
Last week I was able to have a fairly lengthy conversation with Tom Brokaw.
Oh, sure.
And he said he is asked about you daily.
Really?
Specifically your political future, specifically about 2024. He says that he, from the outside looking in, feels that maybe you're moving in that direction. I'm not going to ask you if you're running in 2024, but what I'm going to ask you is, what pressure, or maybe pressure is the wrong word, but how does it feel to know that people are thinking about you in those terms and that you're being watched from afar with that being the thought?
Well, you know, Brian, to be honest, it's not helpful because it causes everybody to want to be critical of every decision that I make and think that there's other motivations. My plans are to stay here in South Dakota. Being President of the United States kind of looks like it might be a miserable job. And people who want to do that, that seems incredibly difficult, and I can't imagine what that would be like. So when people say that, I certainly appreciate that some people think I might have the ability to do that. But it also makes my job harder as governor because they're constantly trying to pull me away from focusing on what I'm doing here in this state. And listen, the only reason that people this last year paid attention to me and why I think that South Dakota is doing so well is because I focused on my job as governor. I made every decision here not based on what was happening in other states around us, not on what the national experts told me to do or where the political winds were blowing. I looked at South Dakota, our specific situation, and did what I thought could be best for the people right here. And that's what got us noticed because it was a very different path than virtually any other state or any other governor took. But for our people in this state, I think they're overwhelmingly satisfied with how we're getting through it compared to many other states. They still have the ability to put food on the table. They still have the ability to see their kids in school and try to protect their public health in their communities, but also try to remain some personal responsibility over their lives.
A bill making its way through the legislature has become contentious, one about trying to force the cost of your security on the out-of-state trips to become public. And one legislator has said that some of the sponsors backed out after pressure from your office. Text message went out with her cell phone number on it, pictured her with Nancy Pelosi and also, who else was on there? I lost my train of thought. Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris. I understand the hesitancy to talk about operational security, but why the hesitancy talking about cost?
Well, it's not my place to talk about security, and I don't think any other governor of South Dakota ever has, or what their security details are. I don't think any other governor in any other state does for purposes that I can't specifically speak to. What I would say is that we did not get after any other legislators. That text message was not supported or authorized by me or anyone on my team. I don't know where it came from, and that some of those allegations that have been made against us are unfair.
Governor, if I can drill down on that for just a second. If we're talking about the use of public funds for your travel after the fact, not trying to get an itinerary of where you're going to be going, who you're going to be seeing, who you're going to be with, why can't that be revealed?
That would be something that I think my law enforcement should answer more so than I should.
You had a couple of bills you have pushed forward involving abortion, one about Down syndrome, what would prevent a Down syndrome diagnosis to be the reason for an abortion here in South Dakota, and the other one also to any baby that was born alive, the doctor would be required to why are those so important to you to push forward?
Well, I've always been pro-life, and I believe every life is precious. Down syndrome specifically, in that piece of legislation, would prevent a doctor from knowingly aborting a baby upon a diagnosis of Down syndrome. We have a 20-week abortion ban here in the state of South Dakota, but a test can be done as early as 10 weeks to diagnose Down syndrome in a pregnancy situation. So I want to make sure that we aren't discriminating against someone just because they have an extra chromosome, that because of that diagnosis, that an abortion is being performed. It's getting a lot of support in the legislature. I hope they will recognize that. And this is something that I believe every single person has a right to life, like our Declaration of Independence states, and that this is an important piece of legislation I hope to see signed into law.
Governor, you said that the national attention and the national spotlight, in your estimation, can do more harm than good for the job that you're trying to do right now. Why continue to be involved in that national spotlight then? You're going to be appearing at some Republican National Party events here pretty soon. Where's the upside for you in continuing to do that?
Well, we've had a unique opportunity to tell South Dakota's story. You know, when I campaigned for governor, I told people that I believed South Dakota could be an example to the nation, that we could do things here because we're a small state, we don't have a lot of people, that we could do reforms and then show them to the rest of the country as a testimony to what's possible. I didn't know that our opportunity would really come through a pandemic, but it gave me the chance to really show the rest of the country about the tourism opportunities that we have in South Dakota, to talk about the jobs and economy that we have here in our state, to really market to people that want to move here. We did a national marketing campaign to law enforcement officers and got hundreds and hundreds of applications from law enforcement officers that want to move to South Dakota because they can be here and make decisions and they know we'll defend their freedoms. So for us, the reason that I do that is because I want to tell South Dakota's story. I promised the people of this state I would tell their story, that I would make sure that I was growing South Dakota, growing our businesses, recruiting companies that give higher paying jobs to individuals and give them careers. And that is really what this last year has given us the opportunity to do.
Now, you have been both highly praised and highly criticized for the way the pandemic has been handled here. You criticized Governor Walz in Minnesota for closing down businesses in the state. He criticized you for not doing enough. How do you draw that balance between the health of the society and the economics of society?
Well, the balance is that you can't have a leader overstep their authority, especially in a time of crisis, because that's really when this country breaks. And I, as governor, and every governor in this country, we saw us examine our authorities, and some chose to overstep what they really had the authority to do. In Governor Walz's situation, now he's facing a budget deficit. He's going to be raising taxes. Possibly other governors will be financing debt. They'll be making huge spending cuts to programs that people rely on because of the enforcement actions that they had no authority to take. For me, I recognized the challenges that we had in front of us, that we could give every single person an opportunity to take actions, give them all the information that I had in fighting the virus, but then give them flexibility and let them still try to keep their family healthy, but go to work and get an education and make sure that they were able to get through this challenging time together. So we made different decisions. I would say that right now we're doing very well as far as the virus goes. We saw a little over 100 cases today. We're under 3,000 active cases. That we have, our economy is doing very well. We're going to put money into trust funds and into reserves and invest in infrastructure when other states are seeing a very different economic situation. So there certainly is a balance, and we all had different situations on our hands. But for me, it all comes down to what is the job of a governor, and do you respect that job and the authority the people have given you, and don't take too much power. Because when that happens, then you soon have a situation where the foundations of this country break.
For years, you represented South Dakota in the United States House. I'm sure you watched what happened at the Capitol on January 6th. We will soon be in the midst of another impeachment trial, this time for the former president, charged with incitement of insurrection. Senator Rounds, Congressman Johnson believe an impeachment trial at this point for him specifically is moot because he's out of office. Is it moot?
Well, I'm not as involved in this discussion on Capitol Hill like they are. I do believe since he's out of office, there are important things that Congress could be spending its time on. What happened on January 6th made me sick to my stomach. It was tragic. I worked there for years, and it was a day I never thought would ever happen in the United States of America. So I think there's a lot of situations in this country over the last year where we've seen violence and riots and protests happen. And my hope is that we all learn to talk to each other better. I think there's consequences, and I've said this for years. There's consequences for the way that we talk to each other on both sides of the political spectrum, and that's why you saw me pursue this year some curriculum that would allow us to educate folks on our history, to give us opportunities for our kids to learn civil discourse and learn to have debate about important issues without it resorting into what we've seen on so many city streets this year. Do
you think it's correct, proper, fair, whatever word you want to use, for many to say that the former president incited what happened? Do you feel that way?
Many times I've said that I didn't necessarily like the way that he talked. There was so many elements there, and I wasn't there that day, that I think that the investigations will continue to go on and we'll learn more.
What do you think of when you see the divisive politics in Washington? Probably more divisive than I can remember it ever being there.
Oh, I think what people don't know about me is that I'm a person who hates conflict. I really do. I tend to be more of an introvert, that this kind of back and forth and ugliness that we've seen is hard on me personally, that I would much rather we sit down and have a robust discussion around a table and stand up in agreement on what the best path is going forward. So the way that I've seen our politics change the last several years has been very devastating for me to watch. If you remember, I was a farmer and a rancher before, and entering into politics the way that this has unfolded the last 10 years has been kind of unbelievable for me to be a part of.
Does that divisiveness impact your decision at all about whether you would want to go back to Washington ever?
I don't even think about going back to Washington. I really don't. I have to go there once in a while to work with cabinet officials, and we're very impacted by federal policy here in our state. But for me, I've always felt a sense of doing my job and doing it well, and whatever I can do in that position and what the people decide to give me as a responsibility to do going forward is what I'll step into.
Governor, following the runoff election in Georgia, which sent Warnock and Ossoff, the Democrats, to Washington, you're on record as referring to them as communists. What did you mean by that comment?
I meant that what they embrace for policies and ideals is socialism, is Marxism, is communism. And as much, I was surprised by how much I got criticized by those comments, because the people that were criticizing me didn't go back and do research on those two individuals that got elected to the Senate. The policies that they embrace are socialist and Marxist policies. What they campaigned on and what they've done in their past and in their history is those policies. So as much as people were bothered by me stating truth in that sentence, they should have been bothered enough to go and research about the two individuals that are in the Senate today and that are going there and working on American politics and policy.
Do you ever get used to the criticism?
No.
For things that you say?
I don't, and I hope I never do. I hope that I always feel it, because I think if there's a point where it doesn't bother you anymore, then you've become probably cynical and have lost touch with people. So, it's very encouraging to me when people are kind and send encouraging notes. I also feel every single criticism too. But I was raised by parents that said to me all the time, you can learn something from even your greatest critic. So when people do point out things that they think I'm doing wrong, I do examine them and see if there's something that I need to adjust. But I also campaigned on my values and my principles and what I believed. And that's what I have to stay true to. And that's how I make my decisions. And if people feel that I'm making the wrong decisions, then that's what the next election is about. They'll have the opportunity to place a vote for me or whoever is running against me, and that's what's pretty special about the republic that we're in.
To that point, does politics now to you feel more like it's about personality than policy?
I feel like at times in this country we tend to elect rock stars rather than policymakers, than deep thinkers. I'm hopeful that by what we see going on right now, that people will realize that they want individuals who want to go forward, that want to tackle complex situations with real policy. I did give a speech and talk extensively in a speech recently about what the Republican Party has done wrong over the last many years. We promised to do health care reform and we didn't. We promised to do immigration policy and we didn't. I think the American people are tired of politicians focusing on giving speeches but never really doing anything. And so my hope is that going forward, we have the opportunity to put forward real policy that will make a difference for everyday Americans.
So how do you keep the Republican Party from splintering with some of the differences that are out there right now?
I'm not sure how you do that, other than I know people, my faith is very important to me, so the Bible specifically says, without a vision, the people perish. They have to have a leader that they believe in and that they think really truly cares about them, that also is willing to be truthful with them. So I'm hopeful someone like that will come that will unite the Republican Party. We're pretty independent thinkers here in America, so I don't expect everybody to agree on everything. But I do hope that we will have someone that comes forward that unites everyone.
Is it possible that going forward, even though everyone would be under the Republican umbrella, there are obviously, right now, traditional Republicans and Trump Republicans. In the short term, Is that just the way it is?
Well, I don't know. It depends on how short the short term is. You know, I think that there's more that unites us than divides us. And we probably spend too much time talking about our differences. And that we need to refocus on what we have in common and focus on those areas. You know, I tell people every day, we woke up in America. We're better off than 99% of the other people in this world just because we woke up here today. We spend very little time talking about that. And that being optimistic is probably one of the greatest traits somebody can have. It's very rare we turn on the news today and hear anything optimistic. And so it's going to take all of us doing our part, not just the politicians and policymakers. It's going to take the media covering some great news stories too, some things that actually worked or policy that's good for people. It's going to take, you know, the everyday families focusing on some of the good things in their lives too. And it will be a unified effort, and good leaders can do that. We set the direction, set the course. I'll do my very best to do that as well.
Talking about keeping the Republican Party together, do you see those same issues here in South Dakota that you see nationally?
Oh, I think we're all really good people here in South Dakota. I think we all want to work together. We've always got a few disagreements, but it's amazing what happens here actually in this legislature. In 40 days, we propose hundreds of pieces of legislation, have debate, they go through in an orderly manner, we balance the state budget, and everybody goes home. I don't know of another state that does it as efficiently and as well as we do. And this year, we're going to focus on putting money into reserves and investing in infrastructure for the long-term benefit, and then making sure that we're putting in place some policies that will allow us to continue to develop and give health care to rural areas, get them broadband internet access, and be able to continue to educate our kids from corner to corner.
Governor Noem, thank you for the time that you spent with us today.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Jack.
And thank you for joining us tonight for this special extended edition of This Week in Politics here on KSFY. I'm Brian Allen. I hope you'll be able to join us next Sunday night at 10:30. And as always, from all of us to all of you, good night now from Courthouse Square.